Aloha, good morning. Happy Aloha Friday. I'm Yenji Denise, joined by Ryan Kalei-Suji. Thank you so much for joining us on the platform of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser for the COVID-19 Care Conversation, brought to you by the Hawaii Executive Collaborative and Hawaii Pacific Health. We are so glad to be with you this morning, and we have two very special guests, Ryan.
That's right. We have both Representative Kyle Yamashita as well as Senator Keith-Aragan joining us this morning to talk a little bit more about some of the efforts that the legislature is making to help to move along some of the capital improvement projects and some of the larger public spending projects that were sort of put on hold during the time of the pandemic when it first broke out. We know the legislature kind of went on a pause. They're back in session right now. We're going to talk a little bit more to them about some of the efforts that's being made right now at the Hawaii State Capitol to move some of those efforts together. Again, we want to thank our sponsors for allowing us to have this conversation. Of course, that's the Hawaii Executive Collaborative and Hawaii Pacific Health. This is really a way for you to engage with our guests. So we encourage you, if you have questions for the representative and senator, to please enter your comments here. It's the first time we're actually doing two guests, so crossing our fingers, everything works out. So far, I think we're good to go. But one of the things that we always like to do is we start off with the count. And again, a pretty historic day, if you will, yesterday with with no cases actually reported.
Yeah, wonderful to see no cases reported in the islands. We have 637 positive cases since the outbreak began, 17 deaths, no new deaths to report to you. Single-digit cases for almost a month now, and to see zero really does mean that we are flattening the curve and, if anything, trending downward. Nearly 90% of the people who've been infected have recovered, so good news all around.
That's right, good news all around. And again, thank you to everyone who's already chiming in and sending in your comments. Let us know where you're watching from this morning. As we mentioned earlier, we have two guests joining us. Both actually represent the island of Maui, but of course they're here in Oahu. We have Representative Kyle Yamashita, who's joining with us now, and Senator as well. Senator Keith-Aragan is here as well. So good morning, Representative and Senator. Thank you so much for joining us. First off, I'm going to start off with you, Representative Yamashita. Talk a little bit about some of the efforts that are being made right now, what's happening right now in the Capitol, and some of the things that you're primarily working on during this sort of condensed special session.
Yeah, so most of the efforts is on the budget, allocating the money for the CARES Act, and figuring out how we're going to deal with the shortfall. So we just actually passed it out of the House, and these agreements have been, because it's a condensed session, these agreements already have been kind of worked out with the Senate. So it's basically taking funds from all different places and putting it into the rainy day fund so that we can deal with that at some point. We're going to be waiting for additional information from the administration so that we can put together a better comprehensive plan of how we're going to deal with the shortfall. But also, right, we have other challenges with unemployment, which is huge, and how we're going to fill those gaps and those kind of things. So I think we're moving along. And the other thing that the senator and I have been working on is putting together a capital budget. I think that's the main reason why we're here, to talk about those things. But that's kind of what we're working on.
Yeah, so Senator, if we can talk more to you about some of those funds and some of the things that you folks are trying to do to help move these projects along. We know that a big part of helping to keep Hawaii moving are some of these, these capital fund projects to help the economy move and help this industry continue on. Talk a little bit about that. What are some of the things that you folks are trying to help to move those things along, and the processes to help ensure that these projects get funded and they get greenlit to sort of move forward?
Yes, because construction is one of the few areas that the state actually can directly impact the economy, and providing these projects and funding them is important. One of the things we started off with at the beginning of the year, I think, was talking about where we could pay for infrastructure that will help housing. And in this budget, we were able to maintain that. We've got about $100 million going into West Oahu to help with infrastructure there that will move the housing projects forward, as well as some of the school projects that have been waiting to have some of those connections done. In addition, I think we've allocated about $50 million to the neighbor islands, Kyle, if I'm correct.
Yes.
You know, there's been a lot of talk of shovel-ready projects. Can you explain to our audience what that actually means and what are the kinds of projects we can expect to see get up and running?
Yeah, so I think what the reason why the shovel ready comes up is because we want to keep our construction industry moving. So one of the things that I looked at was, historically what happened in 2009, 10, and 11 when we had the last economic downturn. And if you look at the numbers of total construction in 2007 and 2008, there was about $8 million of total construction in the state of Hawaii at that time. And of that, the state's portion was about $1 billion, give or take, and it represented about 14, 12% around it, depending on the year. But then when the economic downturn happened, construction fell as low as like $5.6 billion. So it dramatically dropped a lot. And where the state helped was we continued to fund projects that could keep construction moving. So while those numbers dropped in totality, the state was able to, even though we were strapped for cash too at that time, we were able to keep funding at I think it was like 1.1, 1.3, as high as $1.3 billion a year at that time. So our goal this year was to kind of do that also, to kind of look at projects. So we asked all the departments to give us a list, and I think we put that out in our COVID committee report, is how many projects are ready to move and things like that. So that was like a total list of projects that had potential to move. What the senator and I did was we kind of narrowed it down and did it a little more strategic as far as what projects could move, because at the same time we'd like to do them all, but we're limited by resources. So we kind of got to figure out, right, we only can put out so much money in bond funding at a time. And then going into the future, I think we wanted to also have projects in the pipe to deal with future, next year and the following year and the year after that.
What kind of an
Yes.
impact do you think this will actually have? And when we talk about, getting these up and running, how much money do you think you can get into the economy, and how many actual jobs are we creating or saving?
Well, the jobs, I don't have those numbers, but we can get that. We can get that to you at some later time. But we're trying to keep that number in that area, maybe about 1 billion, 1.4 is in state projects to keep that moving. Now, what the private sector will be doing, I'm not sure. But for example, in 2018, the total construction project at that time was like 9.5 billion. So it grew from where it was at 8 billion in 2007 and 8. So
And I think you can see over the last 2 months that construction has continued on some of the islands. So you can see that those people have continued to work. They've been able to support their families, and that's one of the important things that we're aiming at, is to keep one sector of the economy moving as we wait for the recovery for the rest of it. That's one part, and especially because in the construction industry also has the advantage of they're used to OSHA requirements for safety. So they're used to using what everyone's learning now what PPEs are. People in construction in a lot of areas are already used to that.
Yeah, that's great. Senator, I want to ask you, one of the things, of course, that we're hearing is about the tax revenues that are coming in, the budget shortfall. Does that projection for this year impact any of these projects right now, or are all those funds sort of allocated? Meaning, like, are you putting aside some of that money because of those projected shortfalls? How does that and sort of the projections moving forward maybe impact some of the allocations that are happening now for the projects that are currently in front of you?
Well, once we authorize these projects, it'll still be up to the governor and the administration to implement them. And the governor has a lot of authority, and he's going to be monitoring the revenues coming in and out that will be needed to support the debt service that will be involved. And the administration will have to go out and sell bonds at some point. And they've got a bond they've got a bond sales plan over the next 6 years that should be enough to take care of all the projects that are being authorized. But again, it'll be up to the governor to decide when to implement these projects.
You know, on a practical level, just so that people understand process a little bit, you know, the session was basically abruptly interrupted, of course, because of the coronavirus, but you already did have a lot of bills that crossed over. So can you tell us what's going to be happening to the legislation that's sort of already made it partially through? It's not something that you're necessarily addressing this week, as far as I understand, but those bills aren't really dead, are they?
No, this portion of the session was just to handle the state budget, the operating portion, as well as the capital, as well as deal with the CARES Act and a number of other bills related to it. But all the bills that crossed over are still technically alive and can be taken up when we return in June to complete the session. And that's what I think we've already noted, that with the way the revenues are and the shortfall, if a bill had funding attached to it, then it's unlikely that bill will be moving forward. But there are a lot of other bills that are very important that still need to be considered. There are bills that will extend sunset dates. There are bills that will address whether sales of permits and land leases from the Department of Land and Natural Resources are approved by the legislature. Those need to be dealt with before we leave the current session.
I want to ask a question that we got a lot of comments on in the past, people asking about certain specific projects. One of the projects, of course, that's making a lot of headlines is the new Aloha Stadium. And we know sort of the processes that has gone through and how quickly that, you know, officials are trying to move that project through. What happens to the status of sort of Aloha Stadium now, with factoring in all these components?
Yeah, the previous appropriation is still in place. I think all we did was there was an appropriation for, because we needed cash. There was an appropriation for $20 million in cash that we converted to bond funding just for cash flow purposes, but it will not slow the project down per se. And I think it is still a priority of the legislature to keep that moving.
When we,
We'll
oh, sorry, go
have
ahead.
the RFP opening scheduled, so we'll see what happens. I mean, it's possible. Hopefully, the price in the RFP will come in within the amount of money that we've allocated.
Yeah, and if I can go back to the previous question, you know, one of the things that, you know, will be a deciding factor, the reason why there's a pause till June is we're waiting for kind of two things. One is on May 28th, the Council of Revenues will come out with their projections of what the revenues will be for going forward. And that'll be an indicator for the legislature to figure out if we need to tweak or adjust the budget we just passed. So that's one reason. That's also the other reason we're coming back. But the other factor that we're waiting for is to see what the feds do in the next iteration of the CARES Act. If there is additional monies that will help the states fill its budget shortfalls, and that'll be huge if there's anything. So that's why we're waiting till June also.
Well, the possibility is also they'll give us more flexibility in using the money they've already given us. And
That's right.
I think that's the other thing we're looking for.
Right.
I know both of you have been in government for some time. What are you hearing from your constituents in terms of the needs on the ground, and how can the legislature actually address those? Because, you know, every week we have Scott Murakami on here from the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations. And of course, we know the numbers when it comes to people who have applied for unemployment. We see those lines at Aloha Stadium for free food, you know, now every Wednesday and Friday, thanks to the food bank and other community partners who have stepped in. But what I'm curious to hear, especially because you do represent neighbor island communities, what you're hearing from your constituents and what you think that lawmakers like yourselves can actually do to help those folks right now.
Well, mechanically, I think right now, what you need to consider is when the CARES Act was created, it was created for how the rest of the country operates. And one of the unique things that Hawaii has is we're a very centralized state, where education, community hospitals, jails, traffic court, and even EMS are primarily paid for at the state level. All across the country, these major services, which are big budget items, are paid for at the county level. So a lot of the CARES Act, a good portion was given to the counties because across the country, that's how it works. So we allocated a proportionate share because the city and county got their share automatically. And what we're hoping and we're asking the counties to do is all those other things that you just talked about, where to help families cover rent or food or other things like that, because they don't have to pay for those services that the state has to worry about, that they pick up those kind of things. So we're hoping for and we're encouraging the counties to do is to use that money that is allocated to them for those purposes. And I think that'll be huge to help stabilize the economy.
And I
Are
think
you getting, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, and the entire delegation on Maui, for example, has been working fairly closely with with the mayor and the county council there to really work on things, the basic needs of people. I think we've all been involved in distributing food. We've all been involved in making calls for constituents who are having trouble with the UI system, which means a lot of people. And we've all been involved in a lot of the regular community things that we need to do. I think you grew up in the Big Island, so you know how close the communities are. So it's one of those things where it just comes natural that when people see us when we weren't in our quarantine and we're out, that they talk to us and they ask us what's going on, because I think what people want to know is information. People want to know that that the government actually has an idea of where we're going to be going from here. So I think we're fairly pleased with a lot of what our mayor has done. Although I wish he'd open up a few more parks. There's still a few parks that need to be opened, and I think there's a lot of people that still want to get to the beach.
Yeah, interesting to see what happens kind of moving forward with some of those orders being lifted. And we know that we see almost announcements every day that are somewhat happening and coming from those county levels. Just like sort of maybe a final thought from both of you on sort of the next steps. We know that you guys are sort of in the middle of it now. What are sort of the next steps here in the process, and when will things sort of wrap up for you folks?
Well, we each took on a couple of bills. I think we took on the state budget as both the operating and the CIP budget, and we passed that out, and that will be going to our floor and then being sent over to the House for their final look at it. If there's still some problems, we can always go to conference. And I think at the other end, the House will be passing over the work they've done on the CARES Act as well as the supplemental budget for the judiciary. And then we'll get a chance to take a look at that before we take another recess next week.
Yeah, so I think a lot will be done in the next, a lot of the work has been done already as far as those bills. And in my opinion, right now, it's going to be minor tweaks because, again, we're going to be waiting for those two indicators, the council revenue and then what the feds do. And then also during that break we have before June, we'll be looking at bills again that are going to be essential timing wise, or maybe even bills that maybe had money, but maybe just to put the mechanism in place to start discussion and then put the money in next year when we return.
And I
We're
know
seeing,
that
oh, sorry.
sorry, and I know that we've done a lot of the confirmations of the boards and commissions, but there's still going to be a few more that need to be done when we come back in June.
I just want to bring in one comment here. This is from Jesse Browder Van Dyke saying that you guys have been doing Zoom meetings. Check out the Hawaii Senate Facebook and YouTube pages. There are a lot of people who suddenly find themselves wanting to engage in government in a way that they perhaps never had. They may not even know who their representative is, but now they absolutely want to know because they have ideas and concerns about their community. So how do people get in touch with you? Tell us about those Zoom meetings and how they continue this conversation, because there could be people here who have very specific concerns and they want to talk to their own representatives.
Well, they can always contact us at our phone numbers and our email addresses, but we've also, a number of our members have held town meetings virtually using Zoom, using YouTube. And I think this week, I think the Senate has been using Zoom actually for some of our hearings. I think in other parts of it, we've been just taking written testimony, but I think we're slowly getting up to speed, and that's one of the big challenges because we're limited in our resources in doing a live feed of 2 hearings at a time, if is what we've been told. But it does tell us that there's a lot of interest, and that's probably one area where the legislature needs to put more resources in the future, because, and for the two of us who are from the neighbor islands, yeah, we have a lot of people who, if they could participate in the legislative process without having to fly to Oahu, that'd be great. And they can have their input live. And then the technology is getting better, because there's always a concern that if technology breaks down, I think under the Sunshine Law, we technically would have to stop the hearing and then reschedule it.
Yeah, I think, we have to find that balance. So there are a lot of great things that we're learning from, this new reality, but how to communicate with our, using technology to communicate with our constituents. But at the same time, being from the neighbor islands, there are always challenges that we are separated by water. And, you always hear that it's kind of Oahu centric, and and to some degree it's true, where you kind of got to be in the building to participate, because sometimes some of the conversations just happen because you walk in the hall or you're just there. So that balance of this new way of communicating and dealing with things, but at the same time there's value in being all together in one place where we can converse on the fly, if you will.
Yeah. Well, let's hope for the day where we can all sort of be back together again. Hopefully that's sooner rather than later. Well, Representative Yamashita, Senator Keith-Aragan, thank you so much for joining us, taking time out of your schedule to be here and informing our public about some of the efforts that's going on right now at the Capitol. So thank you. Happy Aloha Friday. We'll talk to you folks later. Aloha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So much work to be done. And as they said, they're focusing specifically right now on the CARES Act funding, where that money goes, how to continue to infuse the economy with whatever funding the federal government has handed down, and those shovel-ready projects. What's interesting, they sent out a release about midweek, I believe it was Wednesday, talking about the kinds of projects. You're looking at anything from building a building to actually fixing an IT system. So it doesn't necessarily mean a literal shovel, but there is a lot of construction work that we should expect to see around the state. And I think that will be welcome to see anybody working right now.
Yeah, and again, a point of clarification too, that this sort of condensed session is really to address some of those projects, and that some of the other bills that had been moving through the legislature will actually sort of still be on hold, and that they will actually be resuming in June once again to sort of address those. The money issues, those are, and the money bills, that's going to be sort of the area where things may get a little sticky, because a lot of that will already have been allocated. So a lot of it will be more procedural things, maybe potentially new laws that are going to be put into place. But again, a lot of that all put on hold because of the things that have happened in the past few months with COVID-19. And so, like everyone else, the legislature is trying to find new ways to adjust to this reality, including some of these neighbor island Zoom conferences and ways to interact with people not all physically being here on Oahu.
Yeah. We also want to get to a few other headlines before we leave you on this Friday. Mayor Kirk Caldwell making plenty of news yesterday, extending the safer at home order, but also announcing some openings that he hopes happen, including restaurants the first week of June, but saying basically that he wants to extend the order through June 30th. Governor Ige saying that he plans to do the same.
Yeah, and again, Mayor Caldwell also going as far as to talking about some of the things that he's requesting of the governor, including the potential opening of some of these restaurants and sit-down establishments, and proposing some plans for having outdoor areas for people and guests to sort of come in and eat and partake in while keeping social distancing. But again, under this new proclamation that the governor signed a few weeks back, the counties now have to basically go to the governor for approval in order to kind of create some sort of consistency with the messaging that's coming out, because we saw that there has been a few hiccups and some crosses in the way that orders and communications are being handed out. So the mayor making it known publicly the things that he is asking of the governor. Will be talking to the governor here on Monday once again to get his take on that and to see if some of those proposals that the mayor has put forth will actually be greenlit. One of the exciting things that I think a lot of people were happy to hear the mayor announce yesterday was the opening of these parks and these abilities to do one-on-one sports and exercise activities. again, that's sort of things like one-on-one pickleball, and Tai Chi does not include one-on-one basketball because you need to still continue your social distancing, but yoga where it's allowed, where you can practice those social distancing. So we can expect to see probably more people heading out there into the parks actually beginning today, because that's when the order sort of got released. So we're slowly beginning to see some of these things take effect.
Yeah, and of course we expect retail. That today is the 15th, so retail is opening, across Oahu. A lot of malls are now holding limited hours, and it's interesting to see the different retailers, how they're handling that, allowing only a certain number of people in the stores, really advising cashless exchanges. If you can pay through your phone or through a credit card, but instead of using cash, because they really just want to limit, person-to-person contact. But still, those retailers need to make some money. They've been closed for so long. So we're seeing, Kahala Mall, Pearl Ridge, Ala Moana Center, and others start to open up, in addition to some of the, smaller strip malls and what have you. So we'll see how that goes in the coming days. And we've asked some representatives from retail to come and join us to talk about what that actually looks like on the ground and what shopping will look like over the next weeks and months.
Yeah, a lot of things happening today. Another thing happening today, a food drive, again, that is happening at Aloha Stadium. For more details, of course, you can always head over to the Food Bank's website at hawaiifoodbank.org for more details. This is happening Wednesday and Friday. It is once again at Aloha Stadium. We see thousands of people that show up every time these drives are held. So it really goes to illustrate the need in the community right now. So it's actually opened at 10 o'clock, so encourage people. There might already be a long line. Of course, people waiting as early as 7 a.m., like 2 to 3 hours before the gates even open. So we know that there are long lines there, but that's happening right now at Aloha Stadium.
Yeah, and we also want to encourage you, if you happen to miss one of these food drives or food distributions, or if it's intimidating to get into a line like that, the Hawaii Food Bank does have 200 different distribution sites throughout the islands. So you can go over to their website, find out where you can find a smaller distribution that might be more suited to your family's needs. And also, if you don't have the resources to sit in traffic for that long, not everybody, of course, has access to a vehicle or can make that kind of a time commitment. So head over to their website and see that you get the resources that you need. One of the things we always like to do is highlight the hero of the day. And yesterday, if you looked into the sky, you may have seen the Hawaii Air National Guard. You see them there. And active duty Air Force saying a big mahalo to the healthcare workers and frontline responders with that beautiful flyover.
That's right. I mean, and actually it's something that has been happening throughout the country. Of course, they are our heroes, not only during this COVID-19 pandemic and for their efforts here, but every day we appreciate the service that they provide for our community and for our country. But yeah, a great show. You could definitely hear them yesterday out in the sky. And it was nice to see actually some of the hospitals had their workers go to the rooftops so that they could see this, go into their yards. So it was a nice display of just appreciation again for our healthcare workers. So they are also, of course, our heroes. So we want to mahalo them, as well as this wonderful flyover that happened yesterday.
Yeah, and as Ryan mentioned, we do have the governor coming on Monday. We have Scott Murakami joining us again on Tuesday. We want to talk to him a lot about the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, the PUA program, because we know that money is actually starting to be distributed to people here in Hawaii through that program, or at least notification that money is coming. So, we want to address a lot of those questions. So if you have specific questions on that system, please send them to us. We're also going to be looking back through last Tuesday's show to look for specific questions that may not have been answered in that program. Then on Wednesday, we have a doctor joining us, and Thursday, another doctor, Dr. Jennifer Kang from Hawaii Pacific Health is joining us on Wednesday. Thursday, Dr. Sarah Park, the state epidemiologist, is going to be joining us. We really wanted to talk to her to get a very scientific perspective on how the virus is spreading in Hawaii, what her thoughts are about testing and tracing and what's being done. There's been a lot of political conflict, but we want to go to the pure science with Dr. Park. So we're really looking forward to that conversation with her.
Yeah, a lot of dialogue happening between how much tests that should be taking place. We know that the mayor yesterday, again, calling for more testing, more tracing that needs to happen. And so we want to hear directly from the Department of Health specifically and hear some of their efforts, because as we move into the reopening of many of these establishments and businesses, it's going to be important to sort of gauge and see where we are with these daily counts and what the Department of Health continues to do in their efforts to make sure that everyone is safe. So looking forward to that conversation as well. Again, we appreciate everybody commenting. Again, we like this to be a place where we can help to further the discussion and move it along and try to find ways where you can connect with them. We know that there are a lot of opinions out there and people that are very passionate during this time. And we certainly appreciate your passion. And we know that people are struggling. And it is our hopes just to connect people and to inform people and really to move the conversation forward with questions that will help to advance that. So we want to thank you all for taking time out of your day to join us here and join us every day. We have a lot of people that have become loyal viewers, and we have really appreciate joining you in this process as we sort of navigate through COVID-19 together. So until next week, Monday at 10:30, we wish you a great Aloha Friday. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here next week. Aloha.
Stay safe out there. Aloha.